Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I won't be continuing with my character videos that I've been doing for the last few weeks because I finished my next set of 5 books, so today is going to be a recent reads video. And to kick things off, we're going to start with Fight Club by Palahniuk. I think everybody knows the plot of Fight Club, but if you don't, it's about a guy who's kind of bored with everyday life and his job and sort of living a mediocre life, so he creates this fight club. It's an underground group where guys just kind of take their frustration out on each other. And that's basically the premise of the book. I bought Fight Club a while ago. I'd seen the movie in high school, and I didn't actually know that it was based on a book until I kind of came across it in chapters. But that was years ago. Like, obviously now I know who Palahniuk is, but I actually haven't read any of his books. This is the first Palahniuk book that I have read. And I kind of had a weird experience with it. When I first started reading it, it took me a while to get used to the writing style. It's written as sort of a stream of consciousness, and I wasn't really used to that, having grown up on like fantasy books and classical lit, and I really didn't like it for a long time. It wasn't until about a quarter of the way through when something just kind of switched in me and I immediately started liking it. And from that point on, I kind of really liked this stream of conscious writing style that was used. And while I do really recommend it because it was an interesting read, I did have one problem with it, and it's like a little tiny problem, and it's a problem that I have with actually a lot of books and a lot of movies, and it's that the main character did die in the end. Everybody who knows me kind of knows that I like it when the main characters die. And it's kind of a weird thing, but I just think sometimes it's fitting. Without really giving it away, the main character is dealing with these internal issues, and he does sort of free himself of them by the end, but I think a more powerful way and a more powerful message would have been if he had killed himself at the end to kind of deal with all this internal issues and this boredom and everything that this book kind of sums up. But it was definitely a good read, and I will probably read it again, and I definitely recommend it. So the next book that I read was called A Poison Land, Episode 1, Dark Lies by Craig P. Roberts. And I actually discovered this book while on YouTube. I was looking up book trailers because I was trying to find inspiration to make my own, and his was one of the best that I saw. A lot of the book trailers out there are just kind of like words and images with text put up and some moody instrumentals in the background, but his was like a real trailer for a movie, and that's how I wanted to film mine. So I was immediately interested, and I started looking up his stuff, and I became friends with Craig on Facebook, and I'm actually editing the second book of his series right now, and it's going pretty good. One of the things that is so well done in this book is there's a really interesting blend of fantasy and science fiction, which is something that you don't see a lot of. It's set in a fantasy-themed kingdom where a number of different kings are kind of coming together to hear about this threat to the world. And the world itself is underneath the protection of this shield. And to them, that's the known world. But there's this enemy that's outside of the shield that's kind of breaking its way in, so they're trying to deal with that. And it has some really interesting, quirky characters, but by far the best element of this book is the way that he writes fantasy with that science fiction flavor sort of added into it. It's something that I've seen done horribly in other books, but in this one, he does it so well. It is an independently published book. He published it on Amazon and stuff, and you can buy a copy there. And I'll be putting all of his information in the link below, so you can check out his stuff, check out his sites, and definitely get a copy of this. Because being an independent, self-published author myself, I know that we really have to help promote each other's work and encourage each other to keep writing and keep at the book promotion, because that's a big part. I should give a little warning though, because there's a little bit of language and a little bit of mature content in this book. So after that, I read Brown Girl in the Ring by Nalo Hopkinson. And I was actually recommended this book by my sister Victoria. She was in a post-apocalyptic literature class, and they read this as one of the books in the class, and she told me that I would like it. And I started reading it, and I did not like it at all. It's set in a sort of post-apocalyptic Toronto, even though the setting really has nothing to do with the plot, and really it could be set in modern-day Toronto and it would be no different. It's about this girl who lives with her grandmother who practices voodoo and stuff like that, and it's just sort of about how magic is sort of involved in this post-apocalyptic world and sort of the treatment of lower classes and stuff like that. I was never really attached to any of the characters, and again, the setting really didn't matter, and it wasn't really post-apocalyptic at all. It was basically just Toronto had been run down, but the rest of the world was carrying on, and it didn't quite make a lot of sense. And to be honest, it just wasn't really interesting. The one redeeming factor was the way that the voodoo and all the magic was written, because there were moments where I got chills all up my spine because of how amazing and how descriptive and terrifying that the voodoo magic was in this. It's not really a book that I would necessarily recommend. I did not like it at all. After that, I read Watership Down by Richard Adams. It took me about a month and a half to get through this, and it's not because it was a bad book. It was an amazing book. It was just kind of a mix of it being summer and being lazy, I guess. And for those who don't know, it's about these rabbits. The rabbits are the main characters, and they're traveling to find a new warren and make it their home, and basically that's the whole book. And you're probably thinking, oh, it's a book about rabbits, how good can it be? And it was actually really good. While the plot is kind of slow, the writing is phenomenal in this book. I actually wrote a blog about the writing in this book on my website because it's so beautiful and so pastoral. I'm a huge sucker for fluffy, descriptive writing, stuff like J.R.R. Tolkien. And this book was as beautiful as any Tolkien book. His writing was so pastoral and elegant, and it made you feel so calm and easy just reading the book. He describes the English countryside so well, and he creates this vision that you're almost there along with these rabbits, who are incredibly humanized and who you grow with and end up empathizing with throughout the book. It was such a good read. So the last book that I read was The Color Midnight Made by Andrew Weiner. And this is a coming-age story of a boy who's stuck in a poor neighborhood in California. I actually found this book in a bookstore on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. There used to be a bookstore in this little plaza called Coligny Plaza. I don't think it's there anymore, but that's where I got this. And I got it in 2005, and I would have been 15 or 16 or something. And it was a time when I was trying to read more fiction and get away from the Lord of the Rings and Star Wars books. And this was really the first fiction book that I bought, and it would actually become one of my favorite books. What's really good about this book is the writing, because while it's from the point of view of a 10-year-old kid, there's this overwhelming sense of melancholia and sadness and weariness and poverty that fills the whole book, and Weiner does this so well. I definitely recommend reading this. It's an amazing fiction book that's very underrated. And if you can find it, make sure you get your hands on it because it's really good. It's such a good read. So that's about it for this week's video. Next week I should be back with another character video. I'll be talking about Arthena Kondravian, who's one of my characters from my book. As always, I'll post all the links to my social media accounts below. Make sure to follow me there, and also sign up for my newsletter to get weekly emails sort of updating what's coming up on the blog and if I have any book deals coming up. Make sure to head over to Amazon.com and get your hands on A Chronicle of Crowns, which is my fantasy series. There are 2 books up there that you can get as an ebook or as a paperback, and there are 2 tie-in novels available as ebooks as well. Also, make sure to head over to Lulu.com and get your hands on Transcendence, which was my first poetry and photography book. And of course, I'll post the links to those below. And yeah, that's about it. I'll see y'all next week.